Amy, how are you? To say I'm excited to have you on this podcast is definitely an understatement. So, how are you? Tell us the Amy story and welcome to the Trauma Informed Educators Network podcast.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I'm so excited to be here. My name's Amy Erin Borovoy, and I'm the Director of Video for Edutopia. At this point, I am the longest standing employee of Edutopia, and I have been with Edutopia for 15 years. So I have seen a lot of change in my time at Edutopia. And for those who aren't familiar with Edutopia, we're a source of information about what works in pre-K through 12th grade education that's produced by the George Lucas Educational Foundation. So I oversee all the sort of moving pictures, any kind of media that we do, of which we produce a lot, and we have for quite a long time. We have a big, vast library that I've been working on for the past 15 years. So my story, I guess I'd say that I'm a daughter of an educator who is really a passionate educator. And so since I was a little girl, I was steeped in education, as well as had a deep passion for storytelling. And even as a young girl and as a teenager, I was trying to figure out how I could combine my passion for education with my passion for storytelling. And it felt like making videos for educators was the perfect way for me to do it, which is part of why once I found Edutopia, I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. I'm just going to dig my heels in and stay here as long as I possibly can. So I am not a practitioner myself, but I have an insider's knowledge of growing up in a house with a teacher and knowing how much passion educators bring and what they go through, and sort of always was like, I don't know if I can handle being a classroom teacher, but I want to figure out a way to support teachers because it's just one of the most important things to me. So yeah, that's how I've ended up at Edutopia.
Well, I mean, considering how many videos that you've been a part of, I would say you probably have a much larger bank of knowledge than you probably give yourself credit for, because isn't it over 700 or something videos now that's in the library?
Yeah, and it's fascinating because part of our mission is to dig up best practices and cover them in a variety of different ways. And so over so many years of doing it, I've learned like what works and what doesn't work. And that's really core to our mission, is finding what works from the teachers themselves. Is not saying, here's exactly what we think everyone should do, but you tell us what's working for you, and then we'll find a way to amplify your voice and share your story. And that is really core to what we believe in, is just figuring out various ways to find out what works and then amplifying that. So yeah, so I'd say by osmosis alone, I have learned a lot about education, particularly some subjects that we're really passionate about.
Well, and wow, when you talk about expanding and extending people's voices, I think I am the primary poster child for what you just described. The reason I have this podcast is because of Edutopia. The reason that I started the Trauma Informed Educators Network on Facebook, which is now 26,000 people, was because of Edutopia. And I am a proud featured Edutopia school. And I tell you, I remember when I got the call from Edutopia, it was in April. And they said, hey, we found out about the work you're trying to do. We would love to come and film in May. And I was like, May? Wait a minute. I think the stars aligned and fate, we hit fate head on, because we got every kid's parent to sign a waiver except for like 6. Yeah. And that was the Trauma Informed Schools kind of rollout for us. We had been doing the work for about a year and a half. And wow. And I remember them telling us, this is going to have a really big impact. We hope you understand that once it hits, it's going to have, and I thought, yeah, I bet it's going to be really cool. Oh my goodness. I had no clue, no clue. And wow, what power that you have as a videographer and a creator of videos that impacts education in such a big way. How does that make you feel, knowing that that's exactly what you wanted to do?
Yeah, it's a huge responsibility, for one, of just like the choices we make and who we show and how we show them and which kind of practices we choose to feature. I'd say that your story is really one of the dream stories for us. If we could choose to have every school we cover get their practices as widespread and as well seen as yours were, we would love that. And it's on a spectrum. Some things blow up really big. We've had other situations like yours where as soon as we published this video, there was one from Meriden Public Schools in Connecticut where we published this video about the sensory room, and it was just at the right moment when people were starting to talk about it, and the school started getting phone calls and people wanting to visit. And then we did follow-up articles and follow-up videos because there was just so much desire for that information. So it's something of a, it's definitely a responsibility, but it's also just such a joy to feel like I'm doing something that can support teachers and make a difference. And it's what gets me up every morning. So.
Well, and I can tell you it's validating. It's validating for the schools who have been able to be featured in Edutopia. I can tell you my mission is to impact the world in the greatest way possible. And I had no idea that a video would do that. I mean, I've literally stood on the stage in front of people in England twice. And I really do come down to it was the video. And it's just unbelievable when people connect to something like videos and how that just resonates with them. And I think what you said is it was the right time. I mean, talking about trauma-informed education, it was the exact kind of moment when this was hitting more of a mainstream topic, when some of us had been trying to do the work for quite a while. So unbelievable. So how does Edutopia pick the content that they feature?
It is really a challenge, I will tell you, because there's just endless number of stories that we could choose. And I'd say it's a little bit different right now during the pandemic than it has been at other times. But for a long time, we had a huge franchise called Schools That Work that's a little bit on hiatus right now, but will continue once this all evolves to where it's going next. But in Schools That Work, we really spent a lot of time. For a while, we had a full-time person that was just hunting for schools and taking recommendations from the audience and looking all around different states that we hadn't been to and sort of trying to look at all the different vectors of demographics and grade bands and styles of teaching and look at all those different things and fill in basically a giant grid to like cover as much as we could of schools around the country. But as far as like the larger editorial and just what stories we pick, it's just a mix of the things that we really care about and keeping our ear to the ground and really trying to stay deeply tuned in to what our audience is talking about and asking for. So we have 6 core strategies that we really believe in. Among them, like social emotional learning is one of our biggest ones, and project-based learning is another really big one. And one we've been leaning into lately is really good tech integration, so excellent ways of using tech. And so we're always going to be telling stories about those kind of things that we care deeply about. But then in addition to that, we're listening and saying, okay, beyond those stories that are sort of our bread and butter, what do we need to be talking about right now? How are people responding? When they comment, what are they asking for? What are the things that are getting the most eyeballs and the most engagement? And let's make some more of those. So it's complex because we're considering so many things as we move forward of what we have limited resources, what kind of stories can we tell? We want to tell the biggest variety that we can that'll have the most impact.
Well, and I would say our current time right now gives the opportunity to really explore a lot of, honestly, innovation. You know, I mean, I can tell you we're doing things. We're now one-to-one district. If you would have told me this time last year we were going to be a one-to-one district, and this year I would have called you a liar. There would have been no way, but I also wouldn't have known there would be a pandemic and we would be hybrid and not hybrid and virtual and in person. And so I think now there's such a need for educators to just figure out what works. And I love seeing, even during this current time, the content that's rolling out. It's so relevant. And I think it's powerful that you all are able to grasp things so quickly, turn them around, and let people see best practice.
It's been a fascinating journey for us at Edutopia and the editorial team. We're all growing and learning along with the educators during this pandemic, because especially for my team in video, it's like really what we knew how to do well was go to schools and film and then pull the stories out and distill the best practices from that. And then as soon as all the schools shut down, it was like, okay, you can't go film in schools anymore. What are you going to do now? But the audience was just as hungry, and if even more hungry, for stories and wanting to hear what was happening. So we've been on a really huge learning curve in the last 8-9 months of trying to figure out how to make video without being able to go into the field, and dipping into animation and dipping into like recycling some old video that we've used. You've probably seen your kids in a couple other videos, and just trying to figure out different ways to tell story, and always with our fingers crossed that we'll be able to go back into schools soon to keep doing the good work of capturing the practices that are happening out there. But I think I have to applaud really to we actually get pitches from all around the world to tell stories on Edutopia. And so there's a small team that goes through all of those pitches and figures out which ones they're going to assign. And so one of the things I love about Edutopia is that we have so many educators speaking up and telling their stories. And they have been able to much more quickly than video was able to sort of turn around of the moment stories, and a lot of them. So in fact, our director of marketing was just telling me that we're up 40% in terms of our volume this year of publishing over what we did last year. So with the same little team, we just like started churning it out because there was just such demand. It was like everyone globally was going through the same thing at the same time. We're like, okay, how can we rise up and meet this demand in this intense time? So it's been a wild ride.
And you may not know this, and you can say, I don't know. What is your readership, viewership? What is that like? Because I know it's massive. And I'm just curious to know how many.
Yeah, it varies, but our official number is 12 million a month per when you add together all the platforms. So of course we're on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and then edutopia.org is sort of the mothership, but 12 million people reached across all of those platforms each month.
I mean, you have to feel proud. That number, you have to feel proud to know the impact that you are having on the world, because it is. And again, I'm going to go back to my little experience and we literally were getting emails from around the world of people asking questions and saying, we want to do Peace Corners, or can we do tap in and tap out? We want to know more information. And that's just one little video in this giant library. So, I mean, you have to feel some serious pride behind this work.
I do. I definitely do. And it's been fascinating how it's changed over the long time that I've been here. When I first started working at Edutopia 15 years ago, it was people said, oh, it's the best kept secret. And we had just started actually a print magazine, and people really loved the print magazine, but it was this sort of narrow slice of people that were very excited and really loved Edutopia, but we didn't reach that many people. We had a little email newsletter. We had started as an email newsletter. And then we sort of started realizing that unless we could spread the word better, that we could make all the wonderful stories we wanted, but if nobody watched them and read them, then it wasn't making much of a difference. So, and that is really the trick in our crowded attention economy, is like how to get people to look at you rather than anyone else. And so I feel like we were, again, just in the right place at the right time with the explosion of social media. So I've been here long enough, I'm old enough to remember like before YouTube, and there was a certain point at which we're like, okay, we're going to move everything over to this strange new platform called YouTube, and just starting out with Facebook and Twitter and really building up audiences there, I think early has really been key for us. And for a number of years, like there's some people that are just experiencing us on social, and that's their main place to find our content. And it's built up over the years to what it is now. And we're so grateful for that.
So speaking of pride, what video creation are you the most proud of? Which one are you just like, man, I poured everything into? If you have one, or if you have a couple, which ones stand out in your mind of like, wow, that one really resonated with you as a creator of the videos?
Ooh, that is a really tough question, because I love so many of them for so many different reasons. I will say one of the ones that moved me the most to make was actually this spring for Teacher Appreciation Day. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Everyone is in a panic. Like, what in the world are we going to do to tell teachers that we appreciate them? And one other producer on our team and I had this idea of like, okay, what if we start combing through YouTube for all the teacher vloggers that are posting constantly with their daily lived experiences, and pull out some little tidbits and try to tell a story from scraps of YouTube videos. So not film anything ourselves, but just pull together stuff that's generated by users and try to tell the story of what the last few months have been like for educators. And we were doing it on this incredibly compressed timeline. Of course, we were doing it like, we got to turn this around in 2 weeks. And the story was unfolding as we're trying to gather the footage. We're like, oh, this person posted a new thing. Let's see what they said today. Maybe we can add that. And we did pull it off, and we managed to somehow get like an 18-minute thing down to a 3-minute thing. And then we shared it, and people were just like, this is how I feel. Thank you. This is what we've been through. And I felt so good when we were able to just do something different and capture the zeitgeist of this very intense moment. I felt really good about that.
In validation, I mean, honestly, as a practitioner, I literally was in my school all day today with real live children, real live teachers. Just the validation of feeling like people are listening is so important. And I can tell you, it's so intense right now. In a school that has invested years of social and emotional bank account building in my school, I tell my teachers and my staff all the time, y'all, we are so lucky that we've prepared for this moment, not knowing, but the connections and the culture of the school is still so tight. But there's a natural intensity that is rolling in schools right now that's undescribable. You just can't describe what it is, but it's just so intense. And to have something like that come out for educators around the globe, it's so powerful.
I think everyone's a beginner right now, right? You know, everyone's just like trying to figure out how to do the thing they know how to do in a totally new way, while juggling more responsibility than they've ever had before for most people. I know I have 2 school-age kids at home myself, and I'm definitely juggling my kindergartner and my 4th grader and trying to make it all work. But I do really feel like that's been a really core piece of the content in the past few months, is that relationships piece of just like, it's so much harder right now, but it's so much more critical. Like, take that time to somehow reach across whatever your situation is, whether you're, you know, whether you're teaching the kids totally remotely or whether you've got them masked and distanced in your classroom, or bless them, the educators that are doing both at the same time. Like, I just really feel like that relationship building piece is so key and so much harder right now, but so worth it.
And you know, it's true. But when relationships were invested as the primary focus to begin with, it's now like the moment of why it was so, it's always been important. And it was important well before the pandemic, and it'll be important well after. But it was like, hold on a minute now. We have invested all of this time. Our parents trust us. Our parents are going to be open with us. And I could just feel that synergy happening. Even in March, you know, I made it our first goal once the school went out. My goal was to call every kid in the school. It took me almost a week and a half of straight phone calls. And then every teacher, the only goal was to contact the families and see how the parents were doing and how the kids were doing. And that was it. That was our goal. Now we've gone so far past where remote learning is actually working for so many kids that maybe traditional school wasn't successful for them, but we're like getting these stories of parents going, oh my goodness, my kids, this is the first time they've been successful in so long. And that's powerful too.
So powerful, yeah. And we have heard that story and been like, wow, there are some kids that are really thriving, but that investment, as you say, that filling up that bank. I do another bunch of content that I'd love to mention is our How Learning Happens series, which really, really was a transformation for me in terms of my understanding of social emotional learning and its importance. I feel like in probably the last 5 years, I sort of went from seeing social emotional learning as like, okay, this always felt like it was this really important piece, but it was kind of separate, you know, like, okay, we're going to get a program and it's a binder on the shelf and we're just going to make sure that we do it every day, until like a little bit later, I moved over into, all right, social emotional learning is really like, if you can actually integrate it with the content, it's really valuable to be able to be part of it, all the way to getting to where I am now, which is like, all learning is social and emotional. And if you know the right buttons to press and build those relationships and make that safe environment, then all the learning becomes so much more open and I won't say easier, but that's so much more doable.
And you know, that video that you're talking about was so powerful because you grounded it in science. Edutopia grounded it in the science. And I think that's so important. I always say social emotional isn't something else we do. It's actually what we do. We're social and emotional beings. It's how we learn. We learn in groups. We learn through social interaction. But that video just brought it home with the science measured with the practicality of what happens in a school every single day. And I have to say, I was like so puffed up when I saw my high five with one of our kids in it. And I was like, because this is the core of who I am as an educator from the moment I walked into a classroom. So I had a little bit of pride there. I was like, again, if you'd have told me this when I was in the classroom, I would have told you you were lying. So I think you all you encapsulate so much. So what are educators asking for right now? What are you seeing kind of rolling out that's going to really be transformational here moving forward?
Oh, that is a really tricky one because everyone has such different needs. And when I sort of scan the landscape of what people are asking for, there's definitely like the Monday stuff, like how am I going to deal with this right now?
Yeah.
How can I get a kid engaged to, I'm trying everything and I still can't engage or even find that kid. But then there's also, I think, a renewed focus in just the basics of good instruction. That's not all tech. We sort of leaned heavily into the tech for a while, and now we're still doing more tech than we would have a year ago. But there's also, like, we'll put out something about reading strategies, and people are like, yes, this too. Because like I said, we're all beginners, and we're trying to relearn those basics and how to do them in different environments. So I think, you know, this is historically a time as we get close to the year when everyone's sort of exhausted and just like getting this like march to the end of the year. And so we're just trying to keep enough content that's uplifting and reminding people, like relationships, and of course, wellness stuff is always really critical because people really need to be reminded, okay, you got to take care of yourself as much as you can, despite all the systemic challenges that educators face constantly. So those are the kinds of things that I think we're seeing hit right now, but it's changing week to week, really. Like we're listening. We're like, okay, this week, this is what hit home. But if we do that same thing 2 weeks from now, it might be like the moment's past. So we're very much on our toes right now.
Man, and you know what we all are. Let's be honest. We're all on our toes. Some of us are kind of rocking back and forth going, oh man, are we going to make it till this break here? The next, hopefully tomorrow is ours. But man, I don't know if you've ever read the article. It's called Devasan, the Deep Evil Vortex of September, October, November. But man, are we in that? And it's so funny because I remind my staff all the time, it's November. Like, we know I get on your nerves. Sometimes you get on my nerves. It's November. It's just what happens in school. And then you add the layer of everything that's going on with COVID. You add the political climate. You add the injustice and social justice issues that are happening. It's so heavy, and our kids feel it, and that's the powerful thing that I think the work you do is it really always drills right back down to the student. It's always that bird's eye view, or it's always, looking through a teacher's perspective, but it always comes right down to the student. And so are there any of those moments that stand out to you of like, man, this one really sticks out to me when you're talking about the role and the impact on a student or students?
I mean, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that is always in our hearts. The thing that we come back to is like, sometimes we'll be making content and we'll say, okay, but really, like, where's the student stand in this? Let's make sure that the student is centered. And particularly in video, we've just always really believed in having student voice as part of the videos. Either sit those kids down and get them on camera, and we've gotten some really tiny kids to say some wonderful things on camera, or just as they're in the classroom and making sure that the images we use are not just wallpaper in the videos. You're really getting to hear the learning happen and getting to hear the conversations that the kids are having in the classroom. So there's been so many moments of wonderful student voice in our videos over the years. I don't know if I can pick out a single one.
Yeah. Well, and I'll be honest and tell you from my perspective, one thing that I was so amazed with when Edutopia came in was there wasn't really a laid out agenda. It was, hey, talk to us. And it was unscripted. When we had kids sit in front of the camera, we didn't tell them what to say. There weren't adults sitting. Our staff wasn't sitting next to them. Now, I will admit there were times I'm like, oh, goodness, please don't say anything as a joke. I knew that wasn't going to happen. But they just led the platform for them to what we call as habit 8 in our 7 habits of highly effective people, and find your voice. And there was a confidence after that the kids they still carry with them today. My mentee that was in the video, Peyton, oh my goodness, he knows he's a superstar. And I tell him, you were a superstar before that, but you're like superstar now. But it gives the kids an empowerment to be able to use their voice. And we were very, very straightforward with the kids. You're changing other kids' lives just by using your voice. And their eyes got really big, because it's something we preach at Fall Hamilton, that, we all have the power to change the world. And sometimes that just requires us to use our voice in a productive way. And boy, did they shine. And so many kids shine in your videos. And I thank you for that. And I know educators around the world thank you, because it's not about us. It's not about the educators. It is, right? Ultimately, it is really about us. But it's coming down to, how does this impact students?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we have really trusted crews and producers that go out for us that have been in schools a bunch of times. Sometimes I'll go to hire a camera person and say, okay, but have you filmed in schools before? And they're like, oh, I filmed everything. And I'm like, but have you filmed in schools before? Because there's 70 things happening at once, like kids talking very quietly here and the teachers using their teacher voice over here. And it really, you kind of have to be everywhere at once. And so we have crews that we just really trust that know how to go in and get the kids comfortable and really make sure that they feel safe and ready to share their voices, because we love it when we're able to get that student voice. And it really, I mean, I think any educator watching our videos, if they hear it from the kids, then they're like, yeah, there's not just someone telling me like, oh yeah, you should do this. It's like, I hear it in the kids' voices. This is working for them. It's gold.
That is amazing. What do you see happening in the next 3 to 5 years? What do you think? I mean, do you have any idea of what you see kind of in the forefront? Is there anything that's kind of resonating and sticking out to you?
I'm very much in a get through one day at a time kind of stage.
I hear you.
With my 2 kids at home and reinventing how we make video. But I do think the transformation that I described with social emotional learning, of sort of figuring out that this is core to everything, and we just have to know sometimes very simple levers to pull to like help open up the space for learning. I feel like that's a transformation that some people are right at the forefront of that and totally get it, and then a lot of people are still coming over to that side and not thinking of it as fluffy or like just this is an extra thing. But we need this. That feels like what the How Learning Happens work was all about, was saying, okay, science, like there's research that says relationships matter. It's like what good teachers have always known. But now we're saying, yeah, you're validated. This is really how kids learn better. And this work you do is so important. It's not just about stuffing the lessons down the throats. It's like, you really got to build that relationship and make the safe space and pay attention to the context of where they're coming from and what kind of experiences they have. And like, those are the sort of markers that'll either bring them in and help them learn or make it very difficult for them to learn. So that's, I'd say, I don't know if that's a trend so much as my hope that we can move that message farther and farther and deeper so that we get to a point where everybody's got strategies in their tool belt for sometimes, like I said, really simple ones that can help you just make your classroom more of a place of belonging and safety.
Well, and I think too, and strategies don't have to be anything extensive. No. I mean, strategies, because I think about our own, the journey of Fall Hamilton, and when we started trying to transform the culture of our school, what we realized is we were doing things that hurt kids. And that's really sad and to say, and I've said it hundreds of times to people, but what we realized is it didn't have anything to do with how the kids were responding. It was because we didn't have enough tools in our toolbox to handle when students weren't normal. And I use the big quotes. If you're listening on the podcast, I use that word so loosely, but they were not conforming to the normal expectations that schools put on kids, to be honest, unfairly in a lot of situations. So when we realized, like, wait a minute, it's us, like we're the ones that don't have the tools. That was eye-opening and transformative for myself and my team.
I mean, I feel like I continue learning that lesson every day as a parent too.
Oh, yes.
Just like, hey, learning how to manage your own emotions. And I think probably your school was one of the first ones where you were like, wait a sec, start with the adults in the building. Like, that's the key. It's like, make sure the adults have the tools and then they can support the kids. But it is really hard to undo our own patterns and learn that. And, there's so much learning to do. And we're all just sort of like moving along the spectrum of more openness and more figuring out how to name and manage those feelings, and just respecting all the different ways that different people, different kids are bringing to the table. And the culturally responsive teaching, which is just such a great partner with trauma-informed teaching, is just like really like each kid bringing their own identity into the classroom and making a safe space for all of it. I am amazed by what teachers do every day, and like all of the different, I think I do it in my work too. It's like there's 57 different intersecting things at any given time that I'm trying to make sure I'm paying attention to. And I know teachers are doing the same. And
man, I have to be honest and tell you, I've sat back these last few months and I have been in awe of the educators in my building. Yeah. And I also have to validate, I have remarkably gifted, amazingly talented, and connected staff where we don't have adult issues. We don't have people doing mess. we have people who are so focused on their colleagues and the students and our families that it is like it's miracle. It's a change that I watch, and it just blows my mind. I've been doing observations for the first time ever via video. And so either we sit in live with video, which is very interesting, or the teachers record it and they send us a copy of the video, which I'm going to be honest, it's something that I was asking if we could do last year before the pandemic, because it made sense to me. Like I could sit down with a video and I could jot down times, and then we could have a conversation like, tell me why you asked that question, or tell me why you did that, instead of trying to go from memory. But how transformative it's been for me as a principal, being able to sit down with video of my teachers just being rock stars and then showing them and going, watch this when you did this. Of course, they're like, oh, I don't want to watch myself. But then you can see that sense of pride. So the power of video, even now for us as me as a principal to get to watch these amazing lessons with teachers, it speaks so much to them when you're highlighting it. So I know how what you create impacts on a bigger scale.
Well, and I think it's very deep in the mission of Edutopia. It's like we were founded by George Lucas. If people wonder, like, well, why does George Lucas care? What is this about? He very much had a challenging time in education. He felt like everything was very much rote memorization, and it wasn't until he got to college and was able to start doing things with his hands and really taking things apart and learning in a way that made sense to him that he really flourished. And so when he got to the point where he was able to start his own foundation, he was like, education is like the bedrock of our democracy, and I want other kids to be able to experience what I didn't, which is getting hands-on and getting connected and really like learning in a collaborative way, and not just like sitting in rows memorizing things. And he has kept our mission really true. For we're coming up next year on our 30th anniversary. And of course, he's a filmmaker, so he was like, how are we going to tell people about the better way to do things? Well, let's make moving pictures. And so in the early days, it was like, I remember when I first started, we would make 2 versions of every video. There was like the little tiny postage stamp one if you had the dial up, and then the slightly bigger one if you had the next level up. So we've been making educational videos for such a long time. But so one of the things I love most about my job is circling back to what you said about being able to validate and lift the voices of teachers. Is there's so many teachers working so hard and doing so right by their kids, and teachers get a terrible rap in the media, and it just feels so great to be able to like call people up always with good news and be like, hey, we want to feature you, we want to tell your story and show off what you're doing. And they're just like, me? Yeah, and it feels really good to be able to do good work like that.
So I mean, as a film creator, how does it feel to say that you work under an organization that was started by George Lucas? Like, I mean, how does that make you feel? I mean, that's like you're moving to that top tier of like living the dream, I would assume.
It's pretty wild. And I'm speaking to you right now from Skywalker Ranch. It's the first time I've been here to Skywalker in at least a month or two, because we've all been working from home. But it's a beautiful place, and I feel so grateful that George is he's just been so passionate about this mission for so long and keeps us going single-handedly. And we do get grants from some other people that are supporting our work, usually for special projects, but he has just been like really solid over the years. Like, I really care about this. I'm going to keep making it happen. It's been 30 years now. And he's really passionate about it. But yeah, we do. There are some fun perks, and sometimes people are like, hey, George Lucas, like, how much do you see him and you interact with him?
That's awesome. And something you said about his experience as a student resonated with me. And I truly believe that a large portion of educators get into education for 2 reasons. And I've kind of done some research that is not research, really. It's really when I go to conferences. But anyways, and it is because somebody really impacted them in a positive way. An educator just became a source of that's what I want to be. Or it's because they didn't have a good experience. And I can tell you, I didn't have a terrible experience as a student, but I was a student that couldn't sit down, couldn't be quiet, was always being told to be quiet, and that I was obnoxious and I was getting on people's nerves. And I think that's so powerful that he started, Edutopia as a form of, he didn't want people to experience what he had to experience. So interesting.
It reminds me of a video we just published. We just did a little addendum to the How Learning Happens series in the after school space in an effort to say, okay, learning is happening all the time and not just in the formal classroom, but in the after school and at home as well. And there is a video where we were talking about mentors and how important it was that the kids that were, or the young people that were working in the youth organizations had things in common with the kids. There was this wonderful story about a girl who had gone to this after school program as a child. And then as she became a teenager, she'd had a lot of challenges as a child. Then they called her up and said, hey, do you want to come and be a mentor? And she was like, oh, I don't think I can handle that. What if the kids are like me? And they were like, then you're perfect. Come on down.
Exactly.
Like, you're exactly the right person to be connecting with kids if you've been through that lived experience. And she was like, oh, and now she loves it. She's doing it.
I mean, that I'm going to be honest. I connect to the kids that people they just shy away from. Those are the kids that I'm constantly radiated towards. And I told a crowd at a conference, and when I was in England, I said, I've got to share the biggest irony. I was told my whole educational elementary, middle, and high school experience to be quiet, and now I'm standing on a stage in England speaking, and I got paid. So I was like, the vengeance is mine. I'm finally on a stage speaking. But it comes down to two of focusing on every kid's innate genius and looking for those skills and gifts that kids have, and then building upon it. And I think that's something that I see such a common thread through Edutopia of focus on the kid's strength, focus on what you can do well, do it for the kids, work with the kids, not do it to them. This is what, this is what's best for schools. It's really about the kids. And that's so powerful to me. And I love that that's remained in the forefront of everything that you all have done, because it shows. So one of the last questions that I always ask is, what do you want educators to know right now? And boy, that's a loaded question, because it is what it is. We are in what we're in, and we're doing what we do. But what do you want them to know?
I want them to know that they're seen and loved and appreciated, and that they are doing an amazing job, whatever they're doing, however they're struggling or succeeding. So I'm just so grateful for every educator that keeps showing up and doing it day after day, even as hard as it is. And I know how hard it is. Just that you're seen, and it's so worth it. It's it's everything, really. It's the teachers are everything. All those kids.
I think what we said is, at the end of this, I have a child that's virtually learning right now. He's 9. He actually stays here with my wife. They actually work in this room. My wife works right here. He works over there. She's an engineer. She's not an educator. She doesn't want to be an educator, but she's like, oh my goodness, I don't know how teachers do it all day with a lot of them. And I think there's going to be this resurgence of, wow, educators really do a lot more than people anticipate. At least I hope, once all this dust settles, when it settles, if it settles, when we come back to, and I don't want to say normal, because I don't think we need to get back to normal. I think we need to continue in a phase of innovation. And, when there's a disruption, there's a natural opportunity to innovate. And that's where we are right now. And I want that innovation to keep going where kids are safe at school. But thank you for, go for it.
Oh, I was going to say, I just recently produced a little audio piece that was of you saying that if there's one thing, it's just that let's learn, let's discard what we don't need. When we go into whatever the next phase is, let us move into a new and better space, and take something from this challenging experience, and not just get back into the same ruts and patterns that we were in. This is a great opportunity for us. I'm hopeful that it's so.
And I wasn't going to ask you any more questions, but I am going to ask you one. What's coming hot off of the Edutopia press that we need to be aware of as educators? What do we need to be looking for that's going to be produced here shortly?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm brewing an animation right now with next level Zoom tips. So I'm very excited about that. With if you really people know the basics, but Zoom actually has a lot of features. And so I was like, all right, so many people are using Zoom. I'm just going to go into this one tool and make something that helps with engagement and more collaboration. So I know that's something a lot of teachers are struggling with right now. It's getting kids collaborating when they're remote or together but apart. And so I'm really chipping away at how can we get those kids collaborating again, even in the situations we're in. So Zoom tips video coming soon.
Nice. And you know what? You hit the nail on the head, because I just had a post conference today, and it literally was like, okay, what can we do to get the kids more actively engaged with each other in conversation to build that discourse so they can start challenging each other's thinking and stuff. And we were really trying to get creative because we have plastic shields and kids are wearing shields and masks. And so we're in that space. So I can't wait to share that with my staff once it comes out. So, and I know you don't do Twitter and a lot of social media yourself, but if somebody does want to follow you and your work, where would they find you?
Twitter is probably the best place. You'll see that my account had one long period of activity and now is relatively quiet, but I'm trying to get back over there and pay more attention to it because I know there's so much action and learning happening there. So if you want to find me at Video Amy on Twitter, that's probably the easiest way.
Awesome. And thank you, Amy, for being on here. I can't thank you enough. I can't thank Edutopia enough. I can't thank your whole team enough, because not just what they've done for my school and even for me professionally, but for the world. I mean, what you all put out has changed the landscape of education. And I know you know that, but I'm telling you, as an educator on the ground every day, it's changed me as an educator, not just what you did about Fall Hamilton and the video you created there, but everything that I consume changes me for the better. So I personally, and on behalf of so many educators, just want to thank you for the amount of effort and heart that you put into it.
I'm so glad to hear that, because that's why we do it, is because we want to support all of the educators that are in the trenches doing the good work they do every day. So I'll say again, edutopia.org is the place to find all things Edutopia. And of course, on every social platform, it's Twitter/Edutopia and Facebook.com/Edutopia. We're putting out stuff constantly. We're putting probably at least 12 pieces of content a week with fresh stuff on all different topics, a couple videos a week. To find all that good stuff is very easy to find online.
And if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend the Fall Hamilton Trauma-Informed Processes. That's one of my favorites myself. But if you haven't seen it, please watch it. And I can tell you, we've made some adjustments. You know, the things we did even then, we've already made major adjustments. We don't do reflection sheets and peace corners anymore. We actually teach de-escalation and emotional vocabulary, so kids know what they're feeling and they know what to do when they go to the peace corner. So these things are constantly
the right thing. If you keep evolving, you are doing the right thing.
That is it. And I tell people, I don't apologize because that's how we did it, because at that point in our journey, that's what we did. Now we know better, so we do better. But thank you so much. And if you want to follow me, I am at Principal List on Twitter and Principal List on Instagram. And I also want to remind you, we're going to have the Trauma Informed Educators Network Conference in July. It's looking more virtual than in person. And then, as I please advise every time, every closing, please wear your mask and wash your hands. So Amy, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. This is actually still being recorded, but not on the audio. But man, you just got me fired up, and I cannot wait to see some new content. I mean, you all, I can't thank you enough for everything that that Edutopia has done for Fall Hamilton and even myself. It's incomprehensible. I can't.
The video we made, did you say we're done with the broadcast part?
Yeah.
The video we made about Fall Hamilton was really surprising for us, because it broke the molds very much. Like, we had been getting the drumbeat for years and years of like shorter, like you got to make 1 minute things and 2 minute things. And we've succeeded in finding content that we can fit in 1 minute and 2 minute.
Yeah.
The Fall Hamilton video was like a 8 or 9 minute video, because we just had all this story to tell. And it was one of our top 10 videos in that year. People were just like, we need this. Like, it was just so popular. And I was like, look, they don't all have to be so short.
And I mean, and you squeeze so much in 9 minutes, like, and I've proudly shown that in so many places. And I just sit back like a proud father and just let it play. And then I get to tell our story. And I think that it does speak to people. And people are always like, who did that video for you? I'm like, well, it was done by Edutopia. And they're like, oh, well, that makes sense. But wow, what an impact.
That is definitely one of the parts of our job, is like, how can we tell the most impactful story in the tightest little time. It is really a skill.
Man, you knock it out. And I actually I'm up for principal of the year in our elementary school. So boy, did I use all of that in my application. I was like, it was actually, what was one of the most prideful moments you've had as a principal that had the largest impact? And I'm like, I can nail this question right here. Like, this is the impact. So I really, yeah, it was awesome. We'll pass that along to your team, and please tell everybody I said hello. And yeah,
I think maybe I should follow up with you about Peace Corners, because if you're not doing them anymore and you have some reasons you're not doing them anymore, I have a script about Peace Corners that I've kind of been sitting on, not quite ready to make. So if you have some thoughts,
we're still doing them. We're just not doing them the way we were. We don't have kids go there and reflect. We actually use we actually partner them now with de-escalation, and we're teaching emotional vocabulary, because what we were learning, our kids could tell you happy, mad, sad, and hungry.
Yeah.
And no, you're actually frustrated, or you're irritated, or you're overwhelmed. And man, that was a game changer for us, because
have you seen the video with the preschoolers and the emotional vocabulary?
Yes.
I love that one.
Oh my gosh. And how powerful. I tell people, I wish
that young. So great.
And we actually have PK3, and they do our emotional, we use called Move This World. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but yeah, they have the capacity to know these emotions. And I tell people all the time, think of the world we'd live in right now if every adult had the emotional vocabulary to be able to express themselves. Like,
so huge. I feel like with my own girls daily, I'm like, well, they're really like, stop shouting. Tell me how you're really feeling. Like, what are your feelings?
I do it, and it's so funny because my son will say things like, yeah, I'm so frustrated, and I'm like, yes, thank you for telling me how you feel. So parenting, I tell people, parenting and principaling, parenting is so much harder than principaling. I'm just telling you, it's so much more challenging. Because and I have less patience, which I have to get, like, I've done so much better, but it's like, why do I have patience with 325 of other people's children, but my one can send me to the brink of disaster? So.
Because they know exactly how to push your buttons.
They do. Oh, God, love them.
I saw a meme recently that was like, I never knew how annoying I was until I made a miniature version of myself and started trying to do battle with it every day.
It's so true. Every time he does something like me, I'm always like, oh, you're so much like your mom. And he's like, I'm like you.
Totally.
Well, thank you so much for spending an hour with me. I really appreciate it. I'm probably going to get the audio done tonight. It doesn't take me very long to get it downloaded. So can you send me a picture that you want me to use I do a little promo graphic?
Sure, I sure can. Yep, perfect. I'll do that right after we get off.
I appreciate it. Thank you so very much, and we'll talk soon.
It was really lovely to connect in person. Bye.